Will the yuan ever take on King Dollar as an international currency? This has been the trillion-dollar question and has been argued ad nauseum. However, a new joint study put out by the Center for Economic Policy Research, a pan-European think tank, and the IESE Business School of the University of Navarra offers an interesting take and paints a scary scenario. Yes, it's possible for the yuan to become a rival currency, but the circumstances of that becoming a reality may not be welcomed by anyone, least of all the Chinese. The rise of China and its currency has long raised the question about its potential to threaten the dollar's long dominance since the end of the Second World War. But the war in Ukraine, leading to Western financial sanctions against Russia, and the pioneering digitalization of the yuan by Beijing have made the question even more urgent. These developments collectively constitute the sharpest shock to the status quo since the collapse of the Bretton Woods system 50 years ago, the authors of the study write. Because of the unique position of the dollar, Washington may not only impose conventional sanctions, but also order the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications, or SWIFT, to stop transmitting instructions for cross-border transfers for any institution or country so targeted. For example, against Russian banks and their central bank in the Ukraine war, this increasing weaponization of the dollar serves as a wake-up call. According to the study, recourse to financial sanctions by the United States is bound to lead other countries contemplating even the remote possibility that they might similarly end up in U.S. crosshairs to seek alternatives to the dollar, U.S. banks, and SWIFT as vehicles for cross-border payments. Over time, this may result in some increase in use of other currencies in settling payments and as forms in which to hold reserves. Since 2015, Beijing has been developing the Cross-Border Interbank Payment System, or CIPS, as an alternative to SWIFT for settling international payments. It facilitates payment orders between financial institutions across borders. Its growing use in the years ahead is likely, but it will be especially useful for those cut off or who fear being cut off from SWIFT. They will, of course, have to use the renminbi as their payment currency, but that may be a price worth paying. Here comes the most interesting and scary part. Suppose the West decides collectively to sanction or otherwise declare financial war on China. That would most likely also mean cutting it off from SWIFT. But given the pivotal role China plays as a leading trading partner to 120-plus countries, according to one study, those countries may be forced to use CIPS. The scenario would be more disruptive, the Center for Economic Policy Research study argues. For instance, restricting access to SWIFT for Chinese banks would leave many jurisdictions with no alternative but to make payments in renminbi using CIPS, reflecting China's dominance of global supply chains. In this most disruptive scenario, the international monetary system would resemble a Venn diagram, with U.S. allies using SWIFT and the dollar for cross-border transactions and other jurisdictions settling international transactions with China through the renminbi and CIPS. Many neutral countries may opt to use both SWIFT and CIPS. But what if Washington, Beijing, or both decide to play hardball and force them to choose one or the other? Such a scenario may not only be in the distant future, but also can already happen. Imagine that China adopting measures with respect to Russia over the Ukraine war, or to Taiwan that the U.S. and its allies consider too antagonistic. The study argues a breakdown in relations between the United States and China could lead Washington to impose sanctions on Beijing to retaliate, and both governments to threaten secondary sanctions on countries engaging with the other. This would force third parties to decide whether to do business with the United States using the dollar or with China using the renminbi. Global money and finance, along with everything else, would be split into separate spheres. The transition would be disruptive and the endpoint would be disastrous for everyone. Just as the last Cold War saw the competing ideological systems of the Soviet Union and the West bifurcating the global economy with little trade between them, it's conceivable that the two competing versions of contemporary capitalism end up starting a new Cold War. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel and write your opinion in the comments.